graduates in New Zealand. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm sad that I can't be there in person to eat your lovely seafood and drink your wonderful coffee. So instead, here we are online, and I'm going to now ask you to just give me a couple of minutes to set up my slides I'm going to use PowerPoint in this case, yeah. Okay, let me just move my head. Okay, now hopefully you can all see slides. What I want to do is I want to try and make this as interactive and demonstrate engagement as much as possible. So what I do is I use chat a lot. I use chat a lot because we want to get some sense of engagement. And what I want to do is to talk about ownership, presence, and placemaking through interaction. And what I want to do is to really try and look at the technical and the educational challenges that we have with three main concepts. One is ownership of the process. The second is building your presence. And the third is a concept of what is termed by David White in his wonderful work, placemaking. So I want to take these three concepts and use them. But here's what I'd like you to do. Please, you're probably aware of it, but there is such a thing as the reactions button, and I'm going to ask you at some times to use the reactions button. Secondly, you can interrupt me anytime with questions in the chat box, and I'm quite used to thinking on my feet, so I'm happy to have questions coming in the chat box. Apart from when are you going to finish? That question I'm not going to answer because you know already. So what I want to do is to talk about ownership, presence, and placemaking. I'm not going to use my avatar that you see over here, but I want to talk about how these concepts can inform what we're doing when we are online. Firstly, you will notice that as I talk, I place a lot of emphasis on varying the pace and changing the rhythm as I'm talking, and giving people space to think, because they just see this talking head and some slides. They don't really get a lot of the non-verbals that are missing. The thing about ownership is we have no choice. It is a reality. We were pushed into change like you have been. And sometimes, of course, we're working with technical difficulties. That's a whole nother paper. But in Malaysia, we had situations just like in Indonesia. We had situations where kids were climbing up trees so they could get the Wi-Fi signal to do exams. And this is in East Malaysia. Now, often the biggest thing in this ownership of the process is the students know more about online than the educators. And usually they're more digitally connected on their phones. And so later on, I'm going to say how some of the things to do with phones cannot be ignored, not just on the web. And my other main point is we need to reflect on who we are as teachers and facilitators. So ownership of learning means not ownership of teaching. It's ownership of the students' learning. And far too often, as in this photograph of a yoga teacher, it is transmission method that has just gone online. And this is a problem we have because people don't just want to listen to this idea that the student is a vessel waiting to be filled up. And it's not really transmission that works anymore. And yet, So often I see online the kind of thing I'm doing now. And that is the cultural tradition of the upfront power source. And in my research and the research of others, we found out that often, and this is in rural Malaysia, my research and the research of Moses Samuel and Ming Tiwa, we often found that teachers say they do group work, but they don't. And they often, in fact, just talk at students. So I'm going to suggest, and I can't do it now, but what I would have done if I'm teaching my normal graduate academic writing classes, I use rooms because students need to learn from each other rather than this model of teaching, the teacher as transmission. And you and I know that in our area, in Malaysia and Indonesia, we have a lot of status, sorry, we have a lot of status as a teacher, but it's the learning that's important. So we move on from the past world. Now, is this recent? Have a read. Socrates, 5th century BC. Now, if we're doing this and we're online and we're not getting output, all we're doing is getting our students to be very good listeners, but most of them are used to this world online, especially boys, teenage boys in secondary schools. This is their online world. Now, what are we doing to be part of this? And to engage them, we are in competition with this. Remembering that our words are still powerful, as Nietzsche said a long time ago. So we have an important role to facilitate ownership, cultivate presence, and create placemaking. So these are the three themes I will explore. Okay, so if you're all good with that, can I see a reaction with a virtual thumbs up, please? I'm looking for reactions. Down on the reactions button. Thank you. Okay, reactions button, thumbs up. Good, good. Thank you very much. Thank you. My moderators really switched on this morning. Thank you, Wisma Unita, and others. Great. So here we go. Ownership. Hey, students are already there. They already own the online, but through their phones. And many people don't realize that ownership is in not just on the web, but on the mobile world. And what do students do with this? So this is students from my university, Sunway University in Bandar Sunway, Malaysia. This is research I did just before COVID. And these were students studying business, okay? They like the phones, they like online materials. They think lecturers need to change their role and they want to know more about visual literacy. There's a slight problem. The students said, oh, the online infrastructure isn't up to it. Yeah, we know. They preferred live to recorded learning, but they valued when we shared recorded material with them. Now, this is something that I think will not go away. Record a lecture, you can go back to it, you can relearn. Now, students missed face-to-face, and in a later survey, they said, however, that blended learning is here to stay. And in line with this, it's worthwhile going all the way back to Marshall McLuhan. Have a quiet read and a change from listening to my Kiwi accent. Now, Marshall McLuhan wrote this in the late 60s, and it's even more relevant now. So I'm going to argue that as educators, we need to think about how are we positioned with the technology? What about ourselves? because it's a digital world. This is a very delicious piece of digital art from an exhibition in Georgia that I went to in 2018. So the digital world, the digital realities are here to stay. Even if you're in a place like this is a school parking lot in Sarawak. Yes, it's the school bus parking lot. We still have this happening today. Now, we have no choice but to own the process because we're all Netzians with our digitally extended self. So I'm now going to suggest that in order to work with this process, we have to know who we are. Yeah, we have to understand who we are and realize that you have an online presence anyway. Outside the classroom, you have an online presence. And it is often to do with first appearances, as Hogg talks about in social psychology. We all have online identities. So perhaps it's useful in looking at embracing who we are online, because we have a digitally extended self. Yeah, I got myself up to date with Prof. Safnil when he contacted me about this seminar by looking at him online. I dug around and I saw that he's built his career and so on. And what I was doing was exploring his digitally extended self. Now, I know that educators don't like mobile phones in schools, for example. But you have to remember that at one time, educators didn't like ballpoint pens or markers. It all had to be fountain pens. So I think things are going to change. But remember, we all have a digitally extended self. Ask Uncle Google if you want to know more about this idea. So I have a digitally extended self. This is my, haram hobby of wine drinking. I come from a New Zealand area famous for wine. I also have another site, which is to do with traveling. And I have another Facebook page, which is a Center for English Language Studies at Samway University. So I have a conscious digital self. And I'm aware that we need to think about the fact that there is data mining of ourselves, and that the students, they will go and find out about you online. So who are you online? And we need to consider that images and image making are part of engagement online. Because often we have students embracing short texts without analysis, not considering what's happening. So part of engagement is our online awareness and what we do. Thinking about who we are, because artificial intelligence is mining us. It's a very good book from Harvard University Press called The Atlas of AI, the Atlas of Artificial Intelligence. In other words, everyone on this session, everyone in this wonderful conference has a digital presence. So we need to start with who are we, because we are being searched and mined. And are the students aware of this? And are they aware of critical digital literacy? It's a skill they have to have. Are they able to find out what is fake news? You know, we had that idiot orange man Trump, specialist in fake news. But images can be searched. How real are they? And are we including in our English language skills critical digital literacy? So here's a task. I'm going to get you to do something because I've talked for 15 minutes, and in my experience, students wander off in their head after 15 minutes. They go somewhere else, you know. They see their name on screen, but they're busy on WhatsApp or whatever. So I ask students to consider how they engage with being online. And how do they describe themselves online? That it's Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, or whatever. Now in Instagram, now my son tells me, Facebook is for aunties and uncles, old people. So no, we don't do that anymore. We do Instagram and TikTok. No, you don't know anything. So I ask us to consider this. Just think for yourself. What differs between your online self and how are you in the classroom? Because be aware the students will find out. They will data mine you. So I actually get my students in graduate writing classes, because I also teach some subjects on digital literacy. I ask them to say, how would you describe yourself on your online presence? Because an employer is going to find you. And I do this with my staff. I digitally search them out. CVs are easy to write a nice CV, but what do you really like? Aha. So I have 45 lecturers in my center, and all the ones that were recently hired, I go dig around on the net to see, who are you and who are you as an educator? Are you able to see what's happening online with web page traps? Are you able to work out fake news? Because part of the literacy, part of language, is to be able to see what is true and what is not true. So here's some sites that help. So I think we need to include in our reading skills what's happening with online texts. How accurate are they? Yeah. What's the buy-in text that is online? Because you know that websites and advertisements are always trying to get you in with clickbait. You know, these people that become millionaires from YouTube because of all the ads at the side. And what do they want you to do? So as educators, are we fostering ownership of online texts as well as print? Because we have no choice. Even more so with COVID, everything is online, right? So are we looking at what's happening in terms of the text that students might like to read rather than academic, boring stuff, kind of stuff I write? So I think we need to, with students and ourselves, we have to unpack the filters that are at work. Sometimes students think everything is Google. Ask Uncle and Auntie Google, but Google only really goes to 15% of the web. Are we educating our learners in the use of databases? Because of Google, of course, will give you more of what you like. And are we using online literacy to teach the vocabulary of what is general and what is specific so that they know how to search? So teaching how to search is a very valuable writing skill and vocabulary development tool, so that we get them to see that online there's authority positioning, there's a click that they want you to do. And if you don't have enough vocab, you can't do any of it. Okay, because we have change. Oh, how I miss this. This is me in East Kalimantan, where I can't be now, and just like I can't be where you are in your wonderful town, interesting town of Bengkulu. And it's now a different world. We don't have this anymore, right? And we have big problems with assessment online. That's another whole ball game. So ownership, you have no choice. We have to own the online world. It's not going to go away. It has advantages like this conference we have here, where we have people from Sulawesi, we have people from Malaysia, we have people from Java, and so on. So ownership, we are all involved in the process. And I suggest we need to reflect on who we are online as part of that, because we need to build presence, engagement. And this is a tension between the promises of online, because online is instant, it's mass, it's endless information. It's multimodal. By that, I mean images are a big part of online. It's way beyond just words, and it's on demand. You can rewind. And we have got these promises to work with to ensure presence. So I could be sitting on this beach in my hometown in Gisborne, New Zealand, which I can't go to at the moment. And I could be sitting there learning languages through Duolingo. And this is the tension we have. It's everywhere, but how are we making them see us? So what I'd like you to do is, you all have a mobile phone with you, I assume. Yeah, it's a bit like asking somebody if they have had breakfast. But what I'd like you to do, I'm arguing that ownership, we all have to own things. I would like you to go onto this website and see how we have no choice but to be digital owners, okay? So can you go onto this website and just see why ownership has to be, we have little choice, okay? Can you take a minute or so to go onto this website? And then type any reactions into the chat box. I want to hear reactions, see reactions in the chat box. Any single words, sentences, reactions? Thanks, Gurmoang. Now, have a look at how some of this means we have long texts still in operation. Look at the number of blogs. Look at the number of websites. This is real time, and it's built by Tim Werner, the creator of the internet, and he offers it free. So, ownership, we all have to. Yeah. Yes, there's a huge number of users. And look, it is not all short text WhatsApps. Look at the number of websites, because a website is more authoritative than a WhatsApp, right? Look at the number of blogs. We have no choice with ownership, because we have to own this radical change. Any other thoughts? Some of you are very quiet. We have 154 of us, and I've read only 5 comments. What do you think? What's an interesting fact you find? Yes, the artificial intelligence never sleeps, and the numbers keep moving and growing. And it's huge, right? Now, are we part of it? I don't think we have any choice but to be part of it. Yeah, it's big business. And that's the thing that people are paying for, working with. Okay, I hope you find that interesting. Yes, every second, number of users is increasing. So What we see here is the digital divide is becoming narrower, and it certainly needs to become narrower. And we see that ownership is something we have little choice, but we also need to make our presence because there is a lot of competition. Yeah, and Google is not the only search engine as well, of course. So take a note of that, or take a picture, as my students like to do, of that if you like, because I find it an interesting, live, authentic site showing us that digital world is here to stay. Let me give you another example. You are all language teachers and language learners. Here's some other interesting facts. Mobile assisted language learning has grown, and it's certainly grown a lot with COVID, of course, because we've had stay at home. I mean, I know my house so intimately now because, like you, we've had a lot of lockdown in Malaysia. How about this? These are people learning languages with phones. It includes me. I keep my French going, and I try to improve my Korean so I can talk to my grandson, who's half Korean, and I use Duolingo. Okay, that should be million learners. I did this late last night. So Duolingo, 300 million learners. App Store, there are 200,000 educational apps. So it's huge, and it could outpace what I'm doing now. And I don't think blended learning is going to go away. What has happened with us in COVID in Malaysia is that the e-economy and the e-delivery economy has grown incredibly. So we can probably, like you can inside this, in the cities in Indonesia, you can buy anything, yeah? GoJet and all that, and we have Lazada and so on. And aligning with that is the fact that teaching and learning is also more online than ever before. So presence is to do with ownership, I've talked about, is to do with engagement or participation. And there's a really nice reference here to David White from London College of Art, who talks about presence. So this is a concept I'd like to develop. How do we get presence? Practicality. A lot of my classes, I will not start them until they turn the video on, because I find it really, really difficult to talk to initials. So I have clear on, video on, off. I know sometimes there's connectivity, but the problem with students is they can sign in, go away, have a cup of coffee, play computer games on their other computer, and then come back. You don't know if they're there or not, right? So I use names. I get to know the names of my students, and you and I do this when we teach face-to-face, but I think it's very important. So I try and create presence too of myself and my university by using the backdrop. And I use rooms a lot. So I use peer-to-peer interaction. So even if I'm using Zoom, I use interactive tools like Kahoot, Padlet, Miro, Socrative. Now, if you go online for interactive teaching tools, you will find which ones are free and which ones are free but don't give you much and then try to get you to pay. Trying to get the university to pay for the licenses is fun. I say to them, look, I've got 35 of my lecturers using Kahoot. We want Kahoot Pro. Why don't you get it university-wide? No, it's so expensive. And I go, no, but you want happy students. It's vital. Okay, I can see some administrators going, yeah. So I want a sense of community. Yeah, so I use the class's name quite a bit, and I use group rooms. Many of my students even go and set up their own WhatsApp group. Okay, so they use a WhatsApp group to say crazy things about me, maybe, ha ha ha, or else what they do is they actually swap information in a WhatsApp group. I actually have a colleague in Kida teaching in the middle of the rice fields, no kidding, in the middle of the paddy, and she is using WhatsApp with Telegram because the connection's so bad. So she managed to get the school to pay for the kids to get mobile data on their phones. It's cheaper than the family buying a computer. So they still want community and they want interaction. And sometimes it's just by doing crazy things like this. This is my colleague Kenny in our intensive English program with students. He's got here one student's in Japan, another one's in Korea, and the rest are in Malaysia. So he got it all to, so these kind of things, they might look like the kids' stuff, but people want a sense of presence. They want to know that the talking head is there, but is the listening talking head. Okay, so yes, I agree with you, Gumuang, that blended learning is not going to go away. So engagement, the theme, the very, very important theme of this conference. Engagement and presence are a bit the same. I come to class early. You know why? Sometimes the students will talk to you before the others are there. You remember the old days when you sat at the desk at the front of the class and they would come to you before the class. As soon as someone else comes in, they disappear. Malu, you know. Or afterwards they'll come up. You've asked already the stupidest question in a classroom. Are there any questions? It's a stupid question, right? Because then, no, I don't want to show I'm dumb. Again, malula. And afterwards, they come and ask you the question. So I do that online and I tell them this. I'll come in early. You can ask me anything and I'll stay 10 minutes more. You can ask me anything. And you see them drop off, and you know, okay, here comes a question from him or her. So I use chat a lot, before, during, and after. I do videos on and off if the bandwidth permits. A couple of my classes, my graduate classes, have got a WhatsApp group that I'm in, but I tell them I only answer during office hours because otherwise you know, students, midnight, ding, because the assignment's due in tomorrow. So no, I don't want that. So I do use WhatsApp groups, but I govern it. And it's the same with chat. I try to get comments in chat focused. Sometimes I will just say this. I want you now to take a piece of, where is it? This old-fashioned stuff, it's called paper. And this thing here, I've got to hold it up. This is called a pen, yeah. And I want you to write on the pen and paper a question you have for Orangila Professor Stephen J. Hall. Can you write a question? Can you do that? I'd like you to actually do that. Can you write a question? I'm blending the learning, right? You don't have to go online. Just write a question, pen and paper. That's a very good trick. So later on, when I ask, are there any questions? I know I've got some questions. Haha. But also, if you get the students to write questions, they are thinking about the topic. Yeah. What I've also do sometimes, I give them an on-screen text, and I ask them to write questions about what they see on screen. They can even write them on pen and paper, scan them, and drop the scan into a Dropbox kind of site, if you like. So I get them to actually look at the text. You can do your writing with pen and paper, take a picture of it and send it to here, and then I can read it. So I'm blending the different modalities, right? And you and I know from vocabulary learning that you need, as my Professor Paul Nation says, you need productive output. So getting them to write questions, I think, is really, really useful. I even give them a passage and say, okay, you know, normally we do comprehension questions at the end of a passage. So I tell them the opposite. Okay, read this passage, write the comprehension questions. They can't write the comprehension questions if they don't understand the passage. And by getting them to write questions, it also prepares them for answering questions in the exams. So questions are important. Now, so that's what I talk about. Write, scan, and use cloud sharing like WeTransfer. WeTransfer is free, right? Or Dropbox. And secondly, there are a lot of good free apps. So sometimes I use voice feedback to students with this app called Vocaroo. It has a very important thing going on in Vocaroo. It's free, gratis. I like things that are free, and so does my university administration. I now come to the third part of this talk, which is to do with place making. What do I mean by place making? Often it seems very distant when you just have the talking head like me. Yeah, I'm just a talking head. And maybe the students don't feel they really belong. So I'm going to offer some suggestions for personalizing and sharing community. And we're back to the same old things we used to do when we do face-to-face. Know your students. Add some of the social elements into the before and after the session. Don't be afraid of humor. I think humor is very important, even if sometimes they don't get my jokes. So as we build community, and our communities are very diverse, this is a picture of Malaysians from East Malaysia. Many people don't know that we are a bit like Indonesia. We actually have 137 languages in Malaysia. And a bit like you, everybody speaks 3 or 4, right? So we have the national language, but sometimes we should celebrate the identity of our learners. And I do this by also saying, here's a picture of me with my lovely wife, Lee Soo Kim. She's a Nonya, right? From Malacca, yeah? And you can Google her. So she writes now. She's retired from being a professor. I'm the only one still mad enough to keep working. But anyway, so, and you notice we are into batik. So I too am an online learner. These are some of the principles that I try and communicate. Do you think I knew about Zoom before COVID-19? Only a very little bit. Do you think I knew about Kahoot and Padlet because we've had blended learning in the Center for English Language Studies for 4 to 5 years? So I also use images to communicate. So you can see I've been in the region a while. So this is us in Singapore at a Peranakan Association meeting. And I accept different answers. Now, this is important because you and I know we have too much exam dominance, right? Examinations. But especially at the level many of you are teaching, we need to think that there can be different answers. And I give and accept specific praise. I raised this issue, as I did in an article with my friend and colleague, George Jacobs, because quite often as educators, we're very quick to spot the error, right? The mistakes. We like to bleed all over the page, you know, the red pen days. But I think it's important that we accept specific praise and tell them too, look, I know you want to pass the exams. I've had to go through passing exams. But I want to share that just like now, I'm a reflective Netzian. Huh? What do I mean about reflective Netzian? Yes, Gumawang's got a very good point in the chat here. I use this to give spoken feedback, vocaroo.com. Have a look in the chat. Spoken feedback, because people need to be able to listen to the subject matter, not just read it. So I agree with you. That's fantastic. Flora here. Oh, hi, Flora. Great to see you here. So all the way from East Java, talkandcomment.com. Also very good. So check these out, and we're getting some great ideas from our colleagues in the chat box. Check it out. These are both two practitioners who really work with blended learning in an innovative way. So in the Center for English Language Studies, where I work, we have people who never used YouTube before, but what we've had to do is to put ourselves out there online. So you can check this out on YouTube if you like, because we had a symposium that shows the advantage of us creating presence, working with ownership, and making a sense of place online. The advantage is we can go global, right? Just like we have people here from Surabaya and Sulawesi. So we need to create, though, a sense of place of where we come from. So in my case, as I told you, I'm from Someway, Centre for English Language Studies. But really, we are teachers, we are educators. We have to start with ourselves. So I'm going to move to the point that, yes, ownership, we have no choice. We've got to own the process. Yes, the presence we create is important. So is the sense of place. But we really need to start with ourselves. And who are we? And are we ongoing learners as a digitally extended person? Yeah? Go and find yourself online. As an academic, I suffer from the misfortune of having a guy called Stephen J. Hall, who has published 156 articles. Stephen John Hall is a specialist in, wait for it, fish sex. Yeah, how fish reproduce. So my online presence sometimes gets messed up with a guy who specializes in how fish reproduce. So we need to think about what we do in the classroom with this. I think modeling questioning is important. Compare and contrast is important, and contrast the different modes. How does this online text vary from the written text in print? And check with the tools that are part of digital literacy. How are we able to find out the validity? And are we crediting sources and using visuals? You know, visuals are so important in language learning. I was once a primary school teacher, and when you teach 9-year-olds, you have to have pictures. If you don't, they're like, boring. But now visuals are part of the world for everybody. And you can explore these kind of issues too, because the other beauty about us being Netzians, we're able to share things. So I'd just like to do a commercial break here. You'll like this one, Flora. Commercial break for Teachers' Voices. So this is a professional site. And the beauty about being a digitally aware citizen is that you are able to network with many people and a lot of expertise. So this site is not for language learning, it's for people in language education. And Willie Renadia and Boo Flora were instrumental in setting this up and they did a great job. Started bilingual, now we're up to about 12,000 people, I think, Flora, yeah? So we are learners. We make mistakes, and sometimes in Malaysia, my learners get all malu, they make mistakes. The Japanese are even worse. Oh, they make a mistake. Oh, it's the end of the world. But that's how we learn. And so I model with them that as an academic writer, I'm writing, rewriting, changing, and it's part of the process. So I also talk to them about, what do you do when you see a new word? What about a new vocabulary? Are you playing with language? So now I'd like to go into some practical pedagogy things to do with engaging online learners. Because ownership, presence, and placemaking are actually built on tried and tested principles. Now, I may be telling you a lot of what you know, but I think it's important to remember that online, these principles that we know from classrooms still apply, and that our learners are motivated by spaced, significant repetition, rewards, and a sense of achievement. How do mobile phone apps work? They reward you. Whoa, I've gone up a level. Whee, I'm this on the board. So our students are used to this reward structure with online games, and it's huge. It's a big industry, right? So that thing is actually linked to language learning by spaced, significant repetition, rewards, and a sense of achievement. Let me repeat, spaced, significant repetition. So if they're going to learn new concepts or new words, they've really got to meet them in different ways and daily in terms of language learning. If you don't use it, you lose it. My New Zealand Maori is not very good because I don't have many people to speak with. So I've lost a lot of it. It's important that we don't waste the time of our learners, and we look at the significant vocabulary and grammar, using frequent vocabulary. It's also important that we develop reading. Now, we don't have to have a big library because it's all online. So I'd like to do a plug for the Extensive Reading Foundation for your learners. Graded readers for free. It's online. You don't need the physical book, and yet the content is engaging, and some of them are interactive. So check out all the wonderful tools that are online for us to use. And think about repetition in varied contexts. As my prof, and Safniel and I both had the fortune to be taught by Paul Nation, said you need repetition in different contexts. So that means blended learning has got many advantages to just being print-based. So we can have meaning-focused input. Give them a chance for output. Look at the apps that provide for Blackboard-type situations online. Look at what can happen with Padlet, where they're writing. Yeah? Are they using what is on a mobile phone, the recording device, to send you examples of their English language that you can respond to, either through Vokaru or just sending them a recording? Because now spoken language is even more important with videos. That's why when people got worried about SMS, I said, it's going to die. It's all going to go face-to-face and video, and it has. And if you're interested in fundamental principles, check out the work of Paul Nation that I've referenced here, especially in vocabulary. Don't waste time. Just teach the very important stuff as we build from acquired meaning, from simple to complex, through output and conversation. So back to Socrates. Remember Socrates? Don't worry, I'm not going to go over time, Visma, don't worry. You remember Socrates at the beginning saying questioning was important? So how do we do this in post-pandemic learning? We've got to avoid Zoom fatigue. There's a paper on Zoom fatigue. If you ask Uncle Google, you'll find it. The paper on Zoom fatigue says, not too much of this. Chunk it, 10-minute chunks. Guide the language in peer learning. Use rooms and model questioning through the chat. cross modalities and text types, and go beyond teacher transmission by enhancing questioning, stimulating vocabulary. I say even the back row boys, because I've done a lot of work in secondary education, and the boys always sit at the back and don't learn anything. So, so stimulate vocab for all, and decide on a policy for new text types, and question, and questions. So what I'd like you to do now is you look down at that piece of paper and the pen, and I know you have questions. So I'm going to finish off a very important thing, which is questions, because it is through questioning and building questioning in our learners that we stimulate learning. So I welcome questions. Perhaps if you use the chat, it's the easiest. So could you please type questions in the box? And I welcome any reactions. I hope I've kept you all awake. So could I have a reaction so I know you're still here? Any reactions? Thank you. Any other reactions? We have 152 of us. 2 people have gone to lunch. Thank you, Liz. Anyone else? Thank you very much, Nathaniel. Great. Great to hear from you. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Gumawan. Great to have the reactions. So now, could I have questions in the chat box, please, to finish off? Now, if you want to know I should have given you heaps of references and bored you like that, but you can find references on this website, stephenjhall.com. It's my website, and you will find some of the theoretical things are in the website. So please, you're most welcome to dig around there if you wish. But do we have any questions to finish off? No questions?
Well, probably they are still thinking about what is the question, Prof. Stephen. So yeah. Probably can conclude that, and later on we can also have the after the second session, the second presenter, we can also provide the time for them to ask questions. Probably they're still thinking about what to ask questions, because you have a very fruitful presentation about this. So probably back to you to really finish this.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to listening to the other presenters and the rest of the sharing for this conference. Thank you very much for being with me here this Saturday morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Stephen Hall. So you are a friend of Prof. Satnil when you were in New Zealand.